This is Michael Kaplan from TAGA, and we're here with Mark Whitfield today, filming an instructional video.
Hey!
It's an honor, as
Pleasure's
always.
all mine.
And I want to find out how somebody like yourself is able to blend into different musical situations, which is what we're going to do in the video today, and retain your own voice, but be able to play what's needed for the gig.
Well, for me, it's been a lengthy process, and I want to start out by saying it's not rocket science. And what I mean by that is it wasn't intentional.
Okay.
So when I got to Berkeley, I was only 16. I got out of high school early, and I hadn't been playing guitar as my primary instrument for very long. I was a bass player, mostly classical music. So I could play the guitar, the instrument, a little bit, but I didn't have a lot of vocabulary. And so I just was, dove right into getting as many recordings and try, this is the 1983, so we didn't have YouTube, and I had like 19 records and a record player. That was my music. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was my music collection. I didn't have Walkman yet. This is 83. That hadn't come out yet, right? Or maybe it had. I didn't have one. One of my roommates was a guy named Javon Jackson, who's now the director of the jazz department at Hart in Connecticut, and he was a consummate jazz historian, even at 18. He knew everyone who played. If you put a record on, he knew everyone who played. He knew what week it was recorded, what studio, what label it was for. He knew he could almost get through everyone's solo, and he was really dedicated to the notion that you learn every note that this guy played, and every note that this guy played, and every note that this guy played. You figure it all out, and you put it in the blender, and sooner or later, it kind of comes out like you. And I'm a stubborn cut. I was like, I'm going to learn a few notes that this guy played, and a few notes that that guy played, and I'm going to play them over and over and over again until I like it. Until I like the way that sounds when I play it.
Right.
Not that I didn't like. I revered all of my heroes. But I figured out early on that it was going to take a lot of time to play it just like him, and I was just trying to figure out how to play it. Period.
Right.
And so if I had 8 hours or 4 hours a day to practice, I wasn't going to spend 3 hours imitating that guy and an hour trying to figure out how to be me. I was going to spend 3 hours being me and an hour trying to figure out how to make it better by comparing it to my heroes. And so I got a lot of ridicule for that.
For not just copying.
But I stuck with it, and so I got ridiculed because I sucked, basically, right? So, but what you do, I kept getting better, and I worked hard, and I kept listening and trying to make rep. You learn a little bit, and I would play. That was the other thing. Guys wouldn't play all the time; they'd practice
and never play.
And so I would practice all the time, but I played with everyone, anywhere at all times, and because of that, I was constantly aware of when what I was playing didn't fit. I was like, man, because when I do this, everybody plays a little more. When I do this, they're like, they're like, okay, I don't like that.
Does that mean trying to make them sound better?
In other words, there's a thing, you wonder when some guys play. As their solo starts or their comping, whatever it is, when that person introduces himself into the sound. It either lifts the band up or the band keeps going just like this, or you can kind of shut it down.
Right.
And so I wanted to make sure that in some way, every time I played, whether it was an accompaniment, an introduction, whatever it was, a solo, that there was some arc of an increase in energy and intensity. So I not only made them sound better, but I made us sound better, and because I always wanted to feel like if I was playing, there was a purpose, the reason why I was there.
Something.
Yeah, contributing something that not only that was recognizable, but that's something that would be sorely missed when you stop playing. And so that became the most important thing. I wanted to make sure that every situation I played in, if I wasn't there, I was like, "Where's Mark?"
Yeah.
And so we need that. I like that thing he does. We need that. And so that like I said, it's not necessarily the most scientific approach. But because I wasn't singularly focused on my own, on just what was happening inside here, I focused on how I fit into an ensemble or how I affected the ensemble. then I became way more aware of things that I did that I could use in different situations. Like, oh, wait. And so all of a sudden I had these common themes, common phrases, chord passages, voicings,
even rhythms.
All these things that became part of my arsenal. I didn't know I had a style yet, just an arsenal. Like I could go
keep
to
it in the pocket, pull it out when you
pull
need
it out,
it.
bam, bam,
Right.
and then I could apply that. And I learned, and that was one of the great things about being at Berkeley. I was in a mock studio ensemble. I was in a big band ensemble. I was in a combo. I played with a singer. I was in a kind of a mock rock band. All these things, and I had a chance to fine tune my approach to each situation, so that I didn't have to have an entirely different vocabulary for all these things. I had one vocabulary, but I could amend it and add to it and edit it based on the context. And the better I got at that, the more calls I got.
And once you see that happening, then it's work, right?
Great.
Would you say the vocabulary is, basically, if and I hate to simplify or boil it down to just a
Please simplify it.
blues, jazz.
Yeah.
It's not we're not talking a rock heavy metal vocabulary, obviously, but primarily everything from 1940, up to
sure.
now.
Even that was by accident.
Right.
So when I got my first record, my first guitar, my older brother gave it to me for my 7th birthday. It was a homecoming present for him from Vietnam, and he couldn't play, but he loved guitar. He loved the blues. So he gave.
Here, you play this.
Well, he gave me the guitar, and he gave me a Lightning Hopkins record, Anthology of the Blues. And so here I was, a kid on Long Island where there was no blues. I mean, not necessarily in my neighborhood,
Island,
right?
You're not living.
Learn, and my brother, all my brothers, they were my heroes, and David in particular was my hero. And so if he liked it, I wanted to like it. So I'm sitting there playing, trying to pick out these notes. And so part of that sound from that record became a very important part of the foundation of the sound of music in general in my ear.
That you heard.
And so I didn't even know I could play blues.
Right.
Until years later, when at George Benson's recommendation, I went and auditioned to play with Jack McDuff.
Yeah.
And so and Jack was like, "Well, you went to Berkeley?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, well, all right." Well, he's like, "Well, okay, well, maybe you can still play." And I was like, "Well, what is that supposed to mean?" I just went to 4 years of college. Anyway, the first gig, out of nowhere, this sort of this sort of blues drip, kind of this blues influence started coming from a place I didn't even realize I had it in me, and he brought it out.
Well, you have to, and that's
yeah. Well, you have to, but you can only do it if you got it, right? And I didn't know I had it, and I stayed with him for about a year and a half. And by the time, and Jack used to say, "Yeah, you know what they say about your brother Jack? I can make anything sound like the blues." And to him, it was a badge of honor. To most really dedicated jazz musicians, that would have been an insult.
Yeah.
But I understood what he meant by that.
No, but that's.
He meant everything I play is connected to my soul.
Right. It's
I don't care how it can be complicated, it can be simple, but it comes from here. And as long as it comes from there, you'll reach people with it. Because he didn't want you to just play simple. He wanted the best you had. He wanted me to shed and practice.
But as long as it's honest.
And hit people right dead center. Right. You do that, we love you. And so I took that off into the world, into the practice room and back into the world, And so if I were to describe my sound now, I finally accepted the fact that it's deep in the blues.
Yeah.
It's
and the jazz vocabulary too. I mean,
well,
you can't neglect that at all.
The jazz vocabulary is a learned vocabulary.
Okay.
It's not something you intuitively feel or develop on your own. It's like learning French.
Unless you grow up with it, I guess.
Well, okay, but my parents were jazz fans, so I grew up listening. I got to see Duke Ellington when I was 7.
Yeah.
But still,
but
it doesn't come by osmosis. Jazz is a little too complicated for that. Mm-hmm. You have to actually sit down and learn it. Yeah. But I learned it. I learned a phrase. I could learn a West phrase, a Charlie Parker phrase, a Joe Pass phrase, something from Johnny Smith, something from Greg Green, something from Charlie Christian, something from all these different places. But when I played it, I tried to make it feel and sound and have the same impact as those kind of blues, dripping, honey dripping, soulful phrases. I wanted it to all be impactful. I didn't want people to only be going woo when I played the blues, and then going, that's it, he's playing that. What I mean? So I tried to, I put it all through the same filter, and for me, I think the end result is that people describe my playing as soulful and bluesy, and man, that's the greatest compliment ever.
I mean, soulful just means it's coming from your heart.
Amen to that.
Right.
But I mean,
who wants to listen to dishonest music?
Right. But when I was in school, if you'd have said, "Well, man, that's soulful," I'm like, "Oh God, soulful? No, I wanted to be intelligent." You know what I mean? Like, right? Okay.
Yeah.
But you grow and evolve, and and then the other thing is, no girl wants to go, "Woo, I love this music. It's intelligent." I stopped playing the bass and started playing the guitar because the guitar player in my high school band and all the girls.
That's
let's keep it.
Nobody likes that. No.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, soulful bass player, fine, but not the classical bass player. Yeah. Anyway, sorry guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No. But it's. I mean, it's hard to do, and not only is it hard to get the gigs, but it's hard to get the gigs and sound like yourself. Make a name for yourself. Keep your identity and not have to kind of, all right, well, I got to do this because it's this gig, and so let me not do that.
Right.
To still be yourself, be honest, and to make a living in this industry, which is not easy.
Well, and I did mention earlier that I'm stubborn, and so my parents raised me to be supremely confident in things that I had worked hard to do. So not cocky or obnoxious,
enough.
But if you put in the time, you've worked hard, then you stand up and you do that.
Right.
And so when I was getting towards the end of my stay at Berkeley, I graduated in the spring of '87. Jazz guitar had sort of, in the traditional sense, had kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
I was listening to a lot of, we mentioned Mike Stern earlier, I listened to Mike. John Schofield was really just he had just replaced Mike in Miles' band. And he
so it was the fusionish kind of.
There was guys who had taken '70s fusion guitar and bridged that with that late '60s experimental vocabulary and some John McLaughlin influences and John Abercrombie, who never gets the credit he deserves because all those guys come from him, right? And so when I say those guys, I mean all those guys who became to prominence in the '80s playing that fusion influence. It comes from Abercrombie.
He's not playing with a pick either.
No, I know.
I don't know if he used to, but now he's
no.
not.
I know. And so like, but I saw George Benson playing on television with the Boston Pops, playing the songs from Breezin' in, I don't know, I want to say it was 77, 78, something like that. And he played a hollow body through a polytone. No effects, no nothing, but good grief. It was brilliant. But what struck me was, I didn't think there was ever going to be a point where I could do that. But what struck me, like even when we were talking with Ted Nugent earlier, what struck me about it was it could be done. You could just like a guy could take his saxophone and step to the mic and play in any genre, in any arena. You could take your guitar and plug it in and play anything. You didn't have to have all that just to be there. Right. This is to enhance. Right. This is not to replace.
It's not to cover up.
If you steal all this, my career's not over. Right, I'll still play.
Yeah, all you need is a guitar.
And give me a guitar and a mic. I mean, so it's got to. For me, that's where it's. So I didn't let anybody distract me from that. And everybody tried. I had teachers, mentors, colleagues, guys on the scene with me. Everyone was like, man, I remember a really prominent jazz musician at the time was like, he's like, oh well, I guess you haven't. Made enough money to get your rack together yet, because at that time, all the guys had those big ass digital racks, and I was like, no, that's not what I'm going for. Right. And he's looking at me so weird, I was like, yeah, well, you'll see. But my point was, I liked the direction I was heading, and I knew I just needed time to get it together. So when I got to New York, when I moved here, the summer of '87, I was on an island, literally and figuratively. It was me and two other guitar players. Yeah. Me, a guy named Peter Bernstein, and a guy named Freddie Bryant. There's just the three of us. There were other guys. Kevin Eubanks was here, and
Yeah.
and of course, Rodney Jones was here. There were great musicians here, but they were older and already established. There were 3 young guys going around to the jam sessions, trying to sit in. It was just us, and we all had we were 3 sides of the same coin, if that makes any sense, right?
Yeah.
And so I stuck with it, and I followed the music that I was most interested in at the time. I was hugely influenced by Wynton and Branford Marsalis and Kenny Kirkland and Marcus Roberts and Donald Harrison and Terrence Blanchard. And the only guitar player associated with those guys was Kevin Eubanks. And so I got Kevin's first record, and I was all over it. And I met him, and he was a great dude. And he became like my first big influence. Person to person, one-on-one, right? I hadn't met George yet, so Kevin was the first guy who was larger than life to me, who took the time out to play with me and give me some advice. And he'd be like, "What are you doing? That's horrible." Because he was my big brother. He was like, "Man, that sucks." I want to recommend you from gigs, but not if you're gonna do that. You're not someone from and so having someone who wouldn't pull his punches, but came from a supportive place, encouraged me to move forward and stick with it. And he played kind of a very dry. The only thing that he was adamant about was you had to have a volume pedal, because he loved to have the swells and all that, and that was just his thing.
Right.
I tried it, and I found that. Well, I just found that every time I went to play something cool, I turned the volume off by accident, and then I was like, I'll never get this right, and so and so.
But Kevin's another guy that can do it, and he's still Kevin.
Exactly. Well, that's my point.
He had that gig with Leno. No,
Jay Leno,
right?
sure.
And there he is, and he's playing every style on that song, but it's still
Kevin.
Yeah, but
exactly.
You still know it's Kevin.
And
he was playing that. What's that guitar? The Rivera.
Abe Rivera. Yeah.
And he still sounds like Kevin.
No matter what.
I don't know how you guys do it, man.
Well, some guys, and listen, I went to Berkeley with some guys. I'll never forget. I can't call this dude's name right now. I feel so bad because he's from Long Island. He lived down the hall from me, and he was a beast at school.
Guitarist?
Yeah, and he went on to play with Ozzy Osbourne out, and this guy was, oh God, I could see him. I can't call his name. Dude, if you ever see this, I'm so sorry. Al Petrelli. God, good. This dude was a beast. And there were guys like that. You'd put a record on, and they could play it exactly. If you closed your eyes, you couldn't tell if it was him or the record. And I don't care what the style was. Yeah. And I knew that was never going to be my thing. That if being a studio musician meant I had to be able to slide anonymously in from style to style, it wasn't going to be me, because first of all, I didn't have the patience to copy someone else. I didn't like to copy anyone else. I was the guy that would wear some stuff that didn't look cool. I thought it looked cool, but I would take a chance on wearing what I liked as opposed to what everybody else was wearing.
Just be your own person.
Just because that's what I like. Oh, whoops! I'd adjust it if it was. You know what I mean? Like I was willing to fail. I wanted to be me so bad, I was willing to fail doing it.
But that's.
And I realized now I was very courageous. At the time,
well, look where you are now. I mean, being an individual.
So if I were to put all these things, all this stuff I just said into one, you have to decide if you like yourself. If you like who you are, you trust in that, you believe it, you work really hard, and you go as far as you can with that. There's no guarantee that you're going to go, as far as the people that you admire. You may go beyond that. But I wanted to get to the finish line, whatever that is, wearing a jacket that said Mark Whitfield.
And at least you always stayed. And at that
it's
point,
very satisfying.
Well, you can't look back and say I didn't do it the way I wanted.
I did it, And so one part of it was kind of by default. I knew that I didn't really have the wherewithal, the mindset, and the diligence to spend all that time copying one person, and then move it. But I knew some guys. They could go in the studio and play on 8 different records in 2 days. And just be like, Robin Ford. Now, Robin Ford, he also has a great style of his own.
Yeah.
But I used to go to the studio and watch him because he was gracious enough to let me come hang out. I even used his Dumble amplifiers for my first record because I was Tommy, I was just signing with Warner Brothers, and Tommy was making my first record, and he wanted me to see Rob. He's like, you got to come see a pro do it. And so I went to see Robin play on a Klaus Ogerman record, and Michael Brecker had already played. The record was me, Klaus had already done the arrangements and all that, and Robin was overdubbing some super complicated, line, and I was like, man, this cat is just seamlessly flowing through all this, And he was actually struggling for himself playing all the written parts, but he was killing it. And I was just like, oh God, I'm not ready for this. But how, but I got a son on the way. I got to take this record deal, Then life happens, right?
Yeah,
sure. So I just figured, well, what the hell? I'm gonna give it a shot as me, and it worked out.
And here we are.
And we're about to do this video, and hopefully you're going to give people, well, I know you will, you give people a chance to learn something and maybe put them that much further on the way to whatever their dream is, whether it's becoming a studio musician, becoming their own individual. I mean, whatever, it's not for everybody. Everybody's different, so.
Well, I mean,
somebody else might not want to be an individual for some reason.
This life is not for everybody. But what I've learned about music is that it's here for you to take whatever you want from it.
That's right.
So if all you want to do is play a little better on your Porsche,
hey,
here, I got something for you.
God bless you.
Right. You know what I mean? Like, it's all good,
Yeah.
It's public domain, and some of the greatest, I mean, we'll get into this, I'll start dropping names, That, I always tell my wife, I'm like, well, I play jazz, so I don't make millions, but boy, I get to drop a lot of names. She's like, really? You stop bragging? I'm like, no, that's the one thing I get to do. I get to brag. I'm not going to stop bragging on who I played with, who I know. I don't drive a Maserati, so screw you. I get to drop some names.
Hey, but you play.
Right? Like, exactly. So that's my thing. Like, some of the greatest musicians who were like famous for being cranky and whatever were so generous and sweet to me. And that affected me in a way that even to this day, when some kid emails me and says, hey, come by the house, bring your guitar, come by. If you're gonna be here all day, it's gonna cost you $100. Well, you want to come by for 45 minutes and play something, just bring your guitar, come by.
But that's giving back.
They gave it to me. Yeah.
And you hear that all the time, and it's something that's very common in the jazz world, where you want to learn, come by. If I'm home, come by the house. And for a kid, man, you know what it did to you,
God,
and I know what it did to me meeting some guy, and you look up and you're walking over to the guy's place and you can't believe that
right.
It's like
right. Oh yeah, I'm gonna tell some stories about that for sure.
Let's do this video.
Great.
Thanks, man.
My pleasure.
Once again, this is Michael Kaplan from TAGA, Mark Whitfield. Stay tuned for a great video.